This might be the most highly anticipated video I have ever made, so you might want to stick around. In this video, I'm building a folding infeed table for the DeWalt DWE7491RS table saw. If you guys like my folding outfeed table, then you're gonna love this. To build my infeed table, I'll be using my own plans. And you can get these plans as well as the outfeed table plans right here. And just so you know, this is not the first time I built this infeed table. I've actually been working on it for a couple of weeks and I've gone through several versions to get it right. I think I'm on version 3, I think. The first step is to read all the instructions and gather all of my materials. There are Amazon links in the video description for all the hardware, but you should also be able to find most of the things you need at your local hardware store. However, I would use my Amazon link in my video description to order these exact hinges. I actually went through 4 sets of hinges before settling on these. Now that we have everything, we can cut all the pieces to size. The plans have detailed views with all the measurements you will need to make yours exactly like mine. I'm making all of my cuts with a combination of my table saw and a jigsaw. I'm also using a crosscut sled and a miter gauge, but you can just use your miter saw if you don't have these. Be sure to protect yourself with hearing and eye protection. I also use an air scrubber and dust extractor to try to keep the air as clean as possible. But my air quality meter usually says that is not enough, so I pretty much always wear my dust mask when cutting or sanding. I'm using a 2x4, a 1x4, and a scrap piece of 3/4 inch plywood. I had some maple plywood laying around, so I'm going to use that. Plus everybody knows I like to be fancy. I have a small shop, so I have to move my dust extractor from one machine to the next. So it's best for me to try to do as many cuts as possible on one machine at a time instead of bouncing back and forth. I'm also going to need a drill with a 1/2 inch drill bit to drill holes for the hose clamps that will attach the frame to the saw. As you're cutting all of your pieces, it's a good idea to mark all of the pieces like I have them called out in the plans. For this piece, I'll need to use my jigsaw to carefully cut out clearance notches for the adjustment knobs on the saw. For this small piece, I'm going to cut out the detail with the jigsaw before cutting it to length. It's much safer that way and gives you something to hold on to when using your jigsaw. Once everything is cut, I like to sand everything before I do any assembly. It's way easier to sand the individual pieces than the assembly. I also think you can do a better job. You don't need to go crazy with the sanding. This is not a fine woodworking piece. I'll just do a little sanding with 120 grit sandpaper to remove any sharp edges. Now that we're all done with cutting and sanding, we can move on to assembly. Once again, my detailed plans will guide you every step along the way. Seeing as how I marked everything earlier, assembly is sort of IKEA style. The first part of assembly is to attach these 2 pieces. The pieces will be aligned in this corner. I'm assembling them with wood glue and 2.5 inch wood screws. This will be the main support piece that will attach to the saw. Now just glue on these pieces with some CA glue or wood glue and clamps. They'll be used to attach the hinges, so the hinge screws will help to strengthen this joint. They are mounted 1/4 inch down and aligned with the sides. Now grab the hinges and align them with the top and side edges of the last piece and then mark out the bottom 4 holes. Pre-drill small holes in these locations and install 1 5/8 inch screws in just the top holes for now. Next, I'll install these frame pieces. These pieces will get the table surface even with the table saw surface and allow you to attach the plywood. They'll be installed 1/4 inch from the hinge mounting surface. I figured out how tall these pieces needed to be by putting a level on the table and then measuring down to the hinge. Then I subtracted the thickness of the plywood I used. I cut a relief feature on the front side to clear the fence adjustment mechanism. The 2x4 is narrower than the hinge, so I offset it to the outside of the hinge and installed a 1 5/8 inch screw. Then I checked to make sure the piece was square with the rest of the frame, and then I installed some 3/4 inch screws in the remaining holes on the hinges. Next, I'm going to remove this screw on the table saw and install this 1 inch long by 1/2 inch wide L bracket. I found the perfect bracket at Ace Hardware, but I also found this one on Amazon that's very comparable, so I'm going to use that so you guys can just order it online with the link down below. There is a little bit of variance from bracket to bracket, so you may need to either open up these holes a little bit or add some washers as spacers to get the perfect fitment. Be sure to use blue Loctite when reinstalling the screw. With all the adjustments, the bracket should sit close to the fence mechanism and the bottom hole should be fully exposed like this. Now that the L bracket's installed, move the fence back and forth just to make sure you have enough clearance. If you don't have enough clearance to this mechanism, remove the L bracket and then open up this hole underneath just a little bit in the L bracket so that there's a little bit of wiggle room so you can push it back before you tighten the screw down. Oh, and before we go any further, please don't forget to subscribe, and if you'd like, become a member and get exclusive content. So this is just proof that everybody makes mistakes, even when it's your own plan. This is supposed to be in the bottom, and this is supposed to be on the top. So I need to rip this apart and flip this around. So I'm gonna fix that, and then I'll get right back to it. That looks a lot better. Now we can move on. Now grab some 2-inch hose clamps and open them up and feed them through these holes in the Infeed table assembly. Install the assembly to the saw by guiding it behind the L bracket and then feeding the hose clamps around the table saw frame and tightening them. These hinges were designed for table legs, and as you can see, they don't quite open to 90 degrees, but we can adjust for that. Set a level or other known straight edge on top of the table saw surface. Then measure the distance to the straight edge at both ends of the frame piece. Get the measurement to be as close as possible by adding washers in this location and then installing 3/4 inch screws to fully secure the hinges. Now set the plywood piece on top of the frame pieces and align the front and side edge like this. Then secure the top with 1 5/8 inch screws. Next, slightly loosen the hose clamps and adjust the height of the table so the boards can slide smoothly from surface to surface. Once you're happy, fully tighten the hose clamps and install a 3/4 inch screw through the hole in the L bracket to fully lock in your adjustment. This screw will affect the alignment of the left side of the table, so take your time to get it perfect. It's better to have the top slightly higher than the table saw rather than lower. If it's lower than the table saw surface, your workpiece will run into the edge of the saw's work surface. I like to use the miter slot for accessories, so I'm going to machine in a little dado slot for clearance. With the Infeed table up, use a straight edge to mark the location of the miter slot. Then use a router with a 3/4 inch router bit and a straight edge as a guide to cut the clearance dado slot. This clearance slot is helpful for some accessories. However, because we set this table higher than the table saw table, it's going to have some issues with things like a crosscut sled. But for things like that, just fold down the table. This Infeed table definitely helps support the workpiece so you can focus on making cuts, which makes using the table saw much safer to use with longer workpieces. Then when I'm all done, I fold everything up and put it away. That's it. I'm all done. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe. And then when you're all done with that, head over to my website and get some plans so you can make an Infeed table for yourself. We'll see you guys.